Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad. Tehami. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has inaugurated the Ram Temple in Ayodhya, saying that January 22nd, 2024 is not merely a date in the calendar, but heralds the advent of a new era. The Lord has made me the instrument to represent all the people of India. Now, around 7,000 people were in attendance at this particular inauguration of the Ram Temple. However, the main opposition party, Indian National Congress, stayed away from this particular consecration ceremony, with its leader Rahul Gandhi saying that this consecration ceremony was a Modi's function. Likewise, Chief Minister of West Bengal, Mamata Banerjee, has accused the BJP of using this consecration ceremony as a political and election gimmick. Now, this particular temple has been built on a site of the iconic and historic Babri Mosque. On 6th of December in 1992, a Hindu nationalist mob desecrated and demolished this particular iconic and historic Babri Mosque that triggered the worst ever riots between Muslims and Hindus, in which over 2,000 people were killed. Majority of those were Muslims. Then later on, back in 2019, the Indian Supreme Court ruled out that this particular site be handed over to a trust which would be specially set up for the construction of the temple or this particular site. Now, this consecration ceremony, Pakistan has condemned this one, whether it's a Foreign Office saying, let me quote it, the developments of the last 31 years leading to this consecration ceremony are indicative of growing majoritarianism in India. These constitute an important facet of the ongoing effort of social, economic and political marginalization of the Indian Muslims. The Foreign Office of Pakistan has at the same time urged the United Nations and other relevant international organizations to take cognizance of this particular thing going on against the Muslims in India, especially under the Bharatiya Janata Party rule since 2014, and has also urged these international organizations to take appropriate measures to save the Islamic heritage sites in India from the extremist groups and ensuring the protection of the religious and cultural rights of the minorities in India. In today's program, we are going to talk about the far-reaching impacts of this particular step that has been taken by Narendra Modi-led Bharatiya Janata Party government in India. And for that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Awais bin Wasi, is Indian affairs expert. Dr. Wasi, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we're honored to have been joined by Dr. Amna Mahmood, expert in international relations. Dr. Amna, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. At the same time, on Skype, we are honored to have been joined by Brigadier retired Rashid wali Janjua, CNA analyst. Brigadier Janjua, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Wasi. Let's recall what were those horrific incidents that happened subsequently after that particular demolition. What were those basic reasons or the pretexts on the basis of which the Hindu nationalists desecrated and demolished that iconic and historic Babri Mosque?
Yes, in 6 December 1992, this historic Babri Mosque was demolished by Hindu mobs, and they had this claim that on this mosque is basically built upon a temple, and because of that they thronged, and that mob attacked that mosque, and it got dismantled. So as a result of that, 2,000 people, they got killed, and after 1947 some analysts, they are of the view that this is one of the worst communal violence incidents in India in 1992 which happened. So that was basically the the incident, or that was the background of that incident. And after 1992, when this government came into power, they in fact tried to materialize those claims. In fact, according to a law adopted by Indian Parliament, that these religious places, they cannot be demolished, or there cannot be any alteration according to that law. But what Modi government did was that it set aside that law adopted by Parliament, and all the constitutional provisions which asked for equal opportunities, and the rights of minorities are protected. So Modi government set aside all these things, and the thing which started in 1992 that culminated in today's unfortunate incident.
I'll come back to you. Dr. Wasi, you have pointed out a very important thing over here. There's a certain particular law that provides for the religious places can't be altered. Exactly. There can't be any sort of a modification. I'll come back to you to take your detailed view regarding that and what provisions actually it does contain. Now, Dr. Amna, now simply a mob makes up a reason and goes to a certain particular site of immense significance to a certain considerable large community in that particular country, which claims to be the largest democracy in the world. And there is no one to stop them from desecrating and, in fact, completely demolishing that icon of history.
It was very unfortunate, especially for India itself, because for us that is a Babri mosque, and that is the, in the memory of the Muslim rule here. But for Indians, it was actually the secular face of India which was compromised with this demise, because India has to, as Dr. mentioned, that India has to maintain its religious balance. And if you are in majority, and majority in a democracy has to abide by the respect of minorities, and the basic respect for minority is their religious identity, and that is affiliated with the with their place of worship, and that was compromised. And it was very unfortunate for India, because after that, you see, in 90s it was the rise of Hindutva in politics as well. And then we saw the decision of Indian Supreme Court that was actually carrying this decision of Hindutva. And it means that the demise of secularism in India officially started with the demise of this mosque at the hands of the mob, which was very organized, and that mob was governed and directed by the largest militant organization of India, RSS. So I think that it was integrated effort on the part of the government, mob, and non-state actors as well.
Right, let me proceed to Brigadier Janjua. Brigadier Janjua, going back into the history on that very day of 6th of December in 1992, when this particular iconic and historic Babri mosque was being demolished by a certain mob, a Hindu nationalist mob. So there was no one to stop them from carrying out such a horrific activity, nobody to hold them accountable.
Yes, nobody was there to hold them accountable, because it was a thing that was well planned. If we understand that India has been in the grip of misanthropy and xenophobia ever since the BJP has come to power. And you go back from 92 to 1949, you see this RSS Hindutva nationalism was even then a force to be reckoned with, which was seriously challenging the Nehruvian concept of secularism. And in 1949, some statues were placed inside then Babri Mosque, and Nehru upbraided and remonstrated with the RSS cadres that, look, you've done a wrong thing, and it will have adverse consequences for the unity of India. But then, as we know the history, from 2014 onwards, it has been a steady rise of Hindutva, and India no longer is the land of Nehru's secularism. It is an abode of Nathuram Godse's extremist ideology, and the likes of Hajwar, Golwalkar, and its present RSS leader Mohan Bhagwat. The Modi administration is just capitalizing on the hatred to make some mileage, electoral mileage before the elections. And Indian Supreme Court has also been part of this project. In 2019, it was the Supreme Court that, after a very long litigation, based upon a very dubious kind of archaeological evidence furnished by a complacent kind of archaeological expert, it gave a judgment that a temple could be built. And from there onwards, the temple which you see has been inaugurated today. It's a manifestation of that madness. So it is that madness which does not think that India is a place anymore for any other religion other than India. And as the Modi himself has said quite gleefully, that we have initiated a new time scale, that this event would be regarded as a seminal event 1,000 years from now. So these are the words of a person who is driven by agenda wherein there is no place for minorities, and all other faiths, all other nationalities, though they can only live in India if they pander to the sensitivities of Hindu cultural and religious symbols. And this temple is one big manifestation. This has been built with the generous donations. $4.2 billion has been gathered through public and private donations, and out of which I believe 361 million has been earmarked for this temple. And despite several remonstrances of even Hindu minority rights groups like Hindu Human Rights Group, which is based in USA, which has said that technically this temple could not have been inaugurated before it is completed. And secondly, it could not be consecrated by a person like Modi, who is not a religious, religious figure. But despite that, he has gone for that, and it's a big fanfare has been made. The Muslims are harried, and they have been told not to come out of their houses and even start chanting incantations of
Janjua, now basically this particular point that you've just mentioned right now, that this particular temple can't be inaugurated until its completion. So why in such a hurry? What purposes does it serve, this particular inauguration, especially with Narendra Modi and his party?
Elections which are coming, and the Modi administration is very keen to gain the sympathies of right-wing Hindutva vote, and that is why this has been inaugurated with a fanfare so as to attract the far-right vote bank of Hindutva, and that is why this was very closely synchronized with the elections, and it was as if this is the beginning of the election campaign formally by Narendra Modi. And that is why the opposition led by Congress has boycotted this, and they have their serious apprehensions. They think that this has been used as a cheap gimmick to gain the far-right votes, and it is in fact something that is not beneficial for the cohesion and unity of India.
Very important. Brigadier Janjua, I'll come to this particular point of especially the main opposition party, Indian National Congress, staying away from this particular inauguration and the kind of statement that has come forth by Rahul Gandhi. Now, going back again, once again in time, at that particular time in 1992, when this particular horrific and heinous crime was committed by a Hindu nationalist mob on 6th of December in 1992, those people could have belonged to that particular ideology that was being spearheaded at that time by Bharatiya Janata Party. That was not that famous at that particular time. The power was held with the Indian National Congress at that particular time. So why do you think Indian National Congress could have let that one happen under their nose by a group which was not that popular at that particular time in the society?
The Indian National Congress was not strong enough to countenance a challenge by the Hindu zealots, and it was also fearful of losing the Hindu vote. That is why, despite the verbal protestations, it did not make any serious efforts to stop that destruction of the Babri Mosque. That was done in full view of TV cameras. So brick by brick, the car sevaks, they climbed on the dome and they destroyed the mosque. Several steps could have been taken by the then Congress government, but those were not taken because the whole India was quite polarized, and Congress was fearful that any strong action against this mob, which is quite charged up, which is trying to ratchet up tensions on the basis of religious factor, might harm their electoral prospects in future. So it was unfortunately a very
did it actually affect their electoral prospects? I'll come back to you, because the kind of gains Bharatiya Janata Party had after this particular demolition were of a bigger proportion. So who actually won and who actually lost after this particular demolition out of the two parties, the Bharatiya Janata Party and Indian National Congress? I'll come back to you, Janjua, for this particular thing, for your detailed view. Dr. Wasi, that particular law that you already mentioned, that actually provides that there can't be any desecration, demolition, or in fact the alteration in any sort of a religious place. Please shed a little bit of light on that.
Yes, in 1990s, this law was adopted by Indian Parliament, and that was, this law basically asked for the maintenance of religious position of religious places the way they used to be in 1947. Okay, and Indian court, Supreme Court, they created an exception, and this is something which is quite eccentric exception that they have created, that dismantling a religious place is not allowed, but creating a temple, that can be the justification for that could be made. So that was an exception for Babri Mosque was created, and this parliamentary law was set aside to legitimate this desecration, not only the desecration but dismantling of this historical Babri Mosque. So as we already mentioned, that it seems that judiciary also seems to play, in connivance with the executive. It advanced the agenda of Hindutva. So otherwise, if that court rules by the law adopted by Indian Parliament, there would not have been any justification to demolish not only this mosque but the other mosques which are being dismantled and being demolished. And analysts, they term this this phenomenon as India Modi government's bulldozer policy. So in bulldozer policy, they try to.
So what do we understand from this? Now, as you already mentioned, this particular step taken by the authorities over there, led by Bharatiya Janata Party, and the kind of campaign they've started at that particular time in 1980s, and that led to this particular demolition. And now, back in 2019, the Supreme Court giving that particular verdict, ruling out that this particular site should be handed over to trust to build that temple. Now, breaking that very spirit of those provisions of the law that actually were provided for the religious places in particular, doesn't it raise huge questions about the real functioning of the democracy which it claims to be by setting such type of precedents?
Exactly, you are right that it should be raised in the concerned quarters, by the concerned quarters at concerned forums, that such kind of maltreatment to the minorities in India, which is taking place for quite some time now. And some international bodies, they have been raising concerns, as recently in the last program we discussed extensively about US Commission on Minority Rights. So for since 2020, consecutively, they have been issuing the reports about the minority, the plight of minorities in India. And earlier, there was a UN rapporteur on minority rights. They have also raised concern about the plight of minorities in India. So I think this is quite evident that what India is doing with the minorities, especially the Muslims, is questionable, and it should be taken up by the concerned quarters. This is very much right. But this is unfortunate that the Modi government does not take cognizance or take into consideration anything. What to talk of any parliamentary law? They set aside their own constitution, the constitution which talks about liberty and justice and equality. All these are just, you know, the words on the paper. Practically, if we see in India what is going on, so the situation is quite contrary. There were three things. Number one was the revocation of Article 370. Number two was the Common Civil Code. And number third was after demolition of Babri Mosque, construction of Ram Temple. So Ram Temple, so these were the three basically the agenda of BJP-led government, and now they want to capitalize this construction of Ram Temple as elections are just imminent in April and May. So they want to capitalize that we have materialized, or we have you know, translated that promise into a reality. So I think that these are political oriented and political motivated.
These three things that you just mentioned were the major election campaign promises to the general masses over there. And we know back in 2019, the 5th of August, they revoked the Article 370 of Kashmir also. There was this particular Supreme Court verdict regarding this, which now the inauguration has taken place. I'll come back to you for your understanding as to what sort of an impact it's going to have over the election campaign and the prospects of the BJP and Narendra Modi getting re-elected. Now, Dr. Amna, now as Dr. Wasi has mentioned, there is a law over there that was passed by the parliament, which was overruled, which was actually negated by its spirit by the government as well as then the apex court of the country. So when we talk about the international law, especially when we talk about the heritage sites which hold immense significance to a certain particular community and that comes under the ambit of a minority in a certain country, what does the international law say about it? Is there any procedure or a mechanism in place if any sort of a violation in that regard happens?
Yes, very rightly pointed out. I would add to what Dr. Sab said before, that there was Citizenship Act that was passed recently by the Modi government, and that was in the continuity of what they did with Babri Mosque and what was the decision of the Supreme Court. And actually the apex courts are in democracy, since we are discussing in connection with the democracy in India, and they claim themselves the largest democracy of the world. Apex courts are considered to be the custodian of the human rights and the civil rights of the people. So they fail to observe that role. So that is actually and then that empowered and that made Modi government confident to pass Citizenship Act, and that goes before 1947, you know. And now come to coming to your question, international law as a humanitarian international law, that is actually for the protection of identities of people, and those identities have religious identity as well. So international law protect the provision of security to the religious identity by a nation state. So I think that that is violated, and as Brigadier Janjua was pointing, and Dr. Saqib also, that we can deal it through International Court of Justice as well. Because you know, these human rights voices, they are considered to be very strong in case of some African country, some country like Pakistan, but they are just you know, heedless for India, because they are not implemented with the zeal of the states which are pointing out. Rightly, you see that on G20 meeting, US pointed out, Canada discussed, Australian Prime Minister discussed that what was happening in Manipur, and that because they were religious minorities and Christian minorities. They are not talking about Muslims with that much zeal. And that Manipur incident was a miniature in comparison to what they have been doing with the Muslim minority. So I think that and these religious sites all over the world are protected by international law. They are not only by Indian constitution, but all over the world. So any
is there any
organization.
sort of a mechanism, the concerned agencies under the United Nations which deal with such heritage sites?
Yes, United Nations agencies for religious heritage exist.
And if they see if any sort of a violation or any desecration or a demolition happening with certain particular religious site in
there are
particular.
two mechanisms. One, that somebody reports with the evidences, and second, they would take the notice themselves. And since they are not taking notice themselves, so there should be some authority or some religious organization of Muslims in India, or some leader, or any other Muslim country, like Muslim organization like OIC, can take this issue to that heritage agency, and they can start investigation against Mr. Modi. That's what he has been doing. And I would add to one Brigadier Sahab said that Modi is trying to take mileage. One, secondly, that that there is a history of India when the leaders claim themselves Mahatma. So Mr. Modi wants to raise himself to that pedestal, that he is the Mahatma, and he is bringing Hindu religious status of India to the limelight, and they claim that they would be the Hindu state, and that's why they were changing its name, and they have to.
Right, Brigadier Janjua, now already you were of the view that Indian National Congress couldn't stop that particular heinous crime that was being committed by a Hindu nationalist mob back in 1992, just because of the fact that they were afraid they might lose that electoral race as compared to BJP. But the statistics tell us something otherwise. If they let that happen, it actually went into the favor of Bharatiya Janata Party, which in 1984 had only 2 seats out of 543 in the Lok Sabha polls. A decade later, they had 161. That was a considerable, a huge jump from being 2 in the Lok Sabha. And after that particular demolition, going to 161. So in a way, if the Indian National Congress was afraid of losing the electoral arena, if they could have acted with authority against that Hindu nationalist mob, it actually proved otherwise for them. Please go ahead.
Yes, indeed. As I mentioned, that the steady rise of Hindu nationalism has been a phenomena which is palpable right from 90s onwards. And there was a very strong subterranean impulse of Hindu nationalism, which had started manifesting itself even in the 90s. And the BJP and the RSS, they capitalized upon that impulse and then took it forward, much to the detriment of secular ethos of the country, to which parties like Congress did subscribe to. But their ambivalence and their lack of sincerity in protecting the syncretic, pluralistic heritage of India resulted in their undoing as well. And since they could not put that ideal of Hindu Nehruvian secularism into practice, and they could not defend that legacy, the BJP made steady inroads. And the narrative that was sold was, look, these are all the children of the invaders who despoiled the pristine landscape of India, and we need to bring them back in the fold of Hinduism. And terms like Ghar Wapsi were coined, that look, you come back, adopt the Hindu faith, adopt the attire, adopt the culinary preferences. Only then you will be treated as part of this country. Otherwise, you will remain marginalized. And references were made to invaders like Bakhtiyar Khilji, that he had destroyed the Nalanda University, and now will do the likewise and destroy Muslim madrasas. And they actually went ahead and destroyed a library close to the Babri Mosque in Ayodhya. And not only that, there are so many other mosques which are being threatened, because this poisonous narrative has infected the body politic of India and the masses as well. They are sold a fictional narrative of mythologized Hindu glory, which was despoiled by the invaders who vandalized and took India away from its greatness. This is the narrative poisoned chalice which is being sold to the people of India, disregarding the fact that Dalits and untouchables, they have their own grievances, and they are also at the receiving end of the Indian caste system. We know that there are over 200 mosques which are under threat of dismantling and desecration. The famous historical Gyan Vapi Mosque in uh, Uttar Pradesh, that has also been given the warning that it should be desecrated. And the reason that is given is that we have the archaeological evidence that Muslim invaders, they dismantled our revered churches, and our deities like Lord Rama and all, they are awaiting since centuries for us to recreate now and bring back the mythologized glory. So that narrative jives well with the Modi narrative of shining India, India on the rise as an economic power, and the likes of Mukesh Ambani are also roped into, into that narrative.
Right.
So this is all a kind of Hindutva madness that is being sold, and is being sold, unfortunately, pretty well by a
So if it
populist.
is being sold, unfortunately, pretty well among the masses by Narendra Modi and his party, so where do you see Indian National Congress standing if he's trying to take the political mileage out of this particular action for the upcoming elections to be held from March to May, after, especially given the fact that Indian National Congress stayed away from this inauguration, and if this particular narrative back in 1992 could catapult Bharatiya Janata Party that had only 2 seats in 1984 Lok Sabha polls, and a decade later on in 61, back in 2014 it came into power. It made certain promises, it kept on fulfilling those promises, and if it is selling that pretty well, that particular narrative, do you see Indian National Congress standing any sort of a chance to give it a strong challenge in the upcoming Lok Sabha polls?
Indian National Congress and its coalition of parties, which is known by INDIA, they are making their best effort, but unfortunately there are frictions within that they haven't been able to overcome. But they are taking heart from the fact that BJP won. They took 37% of the vote, and the rest of the votes went to the other parties, polled votes last time. So if this time they could do the constituency politics right, and they could make some coalitions and wean away those small parties, regional and local parties, away from the fold of BJP, then they might mount a strong challenge to the BJP. But
So,
as the thing,
but Brigadier Janjua, after this particular boycott of this particular inauguration, as Rahul Gandhi has said that the RSS and BJP have made January 22nd function a completely political Narendra Modi function. That is why Congress President said that he would not attend the function. He went on to say that we are open to all religions, all practices. Even the authorities of Hindu religion have made their view public about what they think, that it is a political function. Now, as you already opined, that the narrative, the Bharatiya Janata Party is actually leading its campaign where over many, many years it has got substantial gains in the electoral politics. Now, given the fact if the Indian National Congress has stayed away from this inauguration, do you think no matter how better constituency politics it does, because of this boycott of this inauguration, it might perhaps not gain that much of popularity as what the Bharatiya Janata Party might have?
yes, I do tend to agree that the kind of momentum on Hindu nationalist impulse that BJP has made is very difficult now to be countered by Congress and its coalition, because they have a leadership which talks in terms of inclusive polity, pluralism, and India's secular ethos, which is not unfortunately finding much traction amongst the masses, which are charged on a very heady wine of Hindu nationalism. So that appears more attractive, more catchy, and Modi unfortunately, is a populist, and populists, as you know, they thrive on slogans and promises. Those promises might not come to fruition, but he is trying his best to, at the cost of Indian societal cohesion and unity. He's trying to, at the cost of Muslims, snatching away their rights and fulfilling those election promises which were there in its manifesto. And those promises included revocation of Article 7, changing the special status of Kashmir, and now reconstruction of this Ram Mandir. And all those things are, they are jibing well with the popular narrative that India needs to regain its mythologized glory. Obviously, there are voices of sanity also. India is a very big country, very diverse country. People think differently in West Bengal. Communist Party of India thinks differently. Congress thinks differently. The parties in the south, Tamils think differently. In Karnataka, there is a different impulse. But somehow that impulse is not so united to translate into electoral victory. Modi so far has taken hold of Indian imagination, and unless there is a very, very strong challenge mounted by the Congress and coalition, which showcases that what are the disadvantages in the long term for India of this kind of Hindutva madness, which will undo the leaven that bound a diverse country as India into a political union.
Right. Dr. Wasi, now do you think this particular boycott by the International Congress to this particular inauguration is going to have some sort of effect in negative terms on the electoral campaign of Indian National Congress, or is it going to give it more impetus to become more popular or being more of an inclusive political party as compared to Bharatiya Janata Party?
I think that this has the negative effects and negative implication as far as BJP's advancement, keeping in view the upcoming Lok Sabha elections are concerned, because this is the alliance, Indian National Development Inclusive Alliance. They made some headway in the recent assembly elections in the southern part. And earlier in 2019, BJP managed to have some space, carved out some space in some of the southern states, including northern states, and managed to get some 79 seats out of total number of Lok Sabha seats. So now I think that they are heading towards some kind of positive developments in terms of possible electoral victory. Because if you see the statistics, in the 272 is the number to win the majority in the House. And in 272, 224 seats in the last 2019, BJP managed to get, and from other parts of the of India, 79. But now BJP's space, despite having Modi, as Brigadier Saab was mentioning, that it captured the imagination of India, but I think its space is being squeezed, because now they need 48 number. Even if we say that they managed to get 224 in the northern belt, in the cow belt, the same number of seats which they got in 2019. If they retain that, that is still a big question mark. They need 48 seats. So I don't think that they will be able to get 48 seats.
So what are the prospects? I mean, the kind of promises that you earlier mentioned, I mean, they've fulfilled that revocation of Article 20, the revocation of Article 370 back on 5th August in 2019, and this construction of the temple. Doesn't this particular fact increase their prospects?
Of course, it will have a positive impact as far as their election prospects are concerned. But positive effect doesn't mean that they will be able to win that elections, right. Because if we see the recent state assembly elections and the progress that we are seeing, the Democratic Inclusive Alliance that is being made, and the number that they require, I think it would be a big challenge for them.
So why do you think, what was the motive behind Indian National Congress staying away from this inauguration? Of course, they could have thought about a lot of scenarios, perhaps the positive dividends of not joining into this particular inauguration? What could those possibly be?
In fact, because of the political mileage BJP wants to have with that, with this incident or with that celebration and festivity that they are doing, so that alliance tries to counter it. This is number one. Second is that Congress, by and large, apparently that we can say that it talks about the, the provisions which Indian Constitution talks. So I think that for the liberal posture, for the inclusive and pluralist posture, and to get the votes of minorities, especially Muslims, which are great in number. So I think that these are some of the considerations behind this decision of Congress.
Right, Dr. Amna, going again back in at that particular day, 6th of December, 1992. Why would Indian National Congress let that Hindu nationalist mob take over that particular iconic historic mosque and completely raise that one to the ground?
I think that.
Do you agree with that view, which Brigadier Sahib has already given, that perhaps Indian National Congress was afraid of losing that electoral mileage?
He rightly mentioned, but I think one of the factor was that at that time, it was not only Congress government, it was a coalition government. And you know, after 77, there were trends that Indian National Congress was not able to make single party government after that, with the demise of, with the fall of Mrs. Gandhi. And it was very difficult for them to sustain. And as Brigadier Sahib was mentioning, Nehruian pragmatism and his secularism, that was continuously declining. You know, during that period, there were number of even Bharatiya Janata Party government which survived only for 2.5 years, and they were subject to change, and fresh elections were done. But despite that, Congress was not able to regain its unchallenged position which was there before 1977. So I think that it was difficult for Congress. Secondly, as Dr. Saqib said, that it was the political mileage they wanted to gain out of that, that if we are not directly involved, but we are not against Hindu, because Hindu vote matters for. Certainly they are concerned about their minority votes, but minority votes are not more than 20%. So they are more concerned about that.
So it was because of that vacuum which was left by Indian National Congress of not following that Nehruvian ideology,
yes.
The pragmatism. It was the Bharatiya Janata Party that actually capitalized on that particular vacuum.
Yes.
And from 1984, from just 2 seats in the Lok Sabha, a decade later they got 161.
Yes,
but
and
even
I think that
seems to be a huge,
that
huge
was actually the rising national character as a Hindu character of India. That was the reason. That's why BJP made those strides, and then after that you see that Mr. Modi emerged, though he did genocide of Muslims in Gujarat, but he emerged as the nationalist leader. It shows that India is getting more fanatic day by day. And as Mr. Rahul Gandhi is right now, he is actually reclaiming the original stance of Congress as the secular and inclusive. As you see that they have.
It's going to pay him in the upcoming general elections? Quickly, your last comment.
Very small gain, maybe from the areas where minorities are strong. But I think that dynamics in provincial elections and dynamics in federal union elections are totally different. In provincial elections, local issues are prominent, and in national elections, certainly the rise of India as a strong state would be important.
Right, Brigadier Janjua, your last quick comment as to what could the international community or the United Nations do in this particular regard, as the Foreign Office has also urged them to take the cognizance of this fact and take appropriate measures to protect the cultural rights of the minorities in India from the extremists.
The international community should make a strong face. Look at the double standard. United States has not put India as country of particular concern on ICIRF, and India is also signatory to International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 4, 6, and 7 of which clearly mention the rights of minorities, which include the religious freedoms. So those, and India is signatory to ICCPR without any reservations. So that needs to be invoked. But unfortunately, international law is there, legal instrument are there. The Indian nationalism cocks a snook at international law and the global community because of the geopolitical reasons that trump minority rights. That's the unfortunate fact.
Right, Brigadier Retired Rashid Janjua, Senior Analyst, thank you very much for joining us on Skype. Really appreciate that. In the studio, we were joined by Dr. Awais, Wasi, Indian Affairs expert. Dr. Wasi, thank you very much for your time. And Dr. Amna Mahmood, expert international relations. Dr. Amna, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.